Hello and welcome back to JLXP after a ridiculously entertaining playoff week. There were 4 best of 5s to play a maximum of 20 games, and we got 19. So the FlyQuest TSM series kicked us off. That was the first upset. TSM subbed in Tactical Game 3, kicked FlyQuest out of the playoffs, moved on to the next round, surprisingly. Then we had the CLG matchup against Golden Guardians, which I predicted to be 3-0. I thought CLG would take care of business easily. They did not. That was 3-2, went down to the wire. Then we had yesterday Team Liquid versus 100 Thieves. I say yesterday because I'm recording this Sunday night. Team Liquid versus 100 Thieves to see who goes to Worlds, the continuation of what is the biggest modern rivalry in League of Legends. Going into it, 100 Thieves had won 2 of the last 3 best of 5s, but 2 of them had gone the distance. This one also goes the distance, is a near reverse sweep by Team Liquid, and Closer ends it with some of the most ridiculously sin plays that, looking back, probably could have been stopped by either the Renekton or the Leona or the Azir. But it doesn't really matter, because in the moment it was so crazy. They move on to Worlds, knock TL to the losers bracket. And then the biggest upset of the weekend, C9 knocking EG down to the losers bracket. EG had lost 3 games the entire split, and they lose 3 games today to C9. And C9 ends up moving to Worlds. So this episode, I'm going to break down in more detail the C9 EG series and the TL 100 Thieves series, because those are the ones of greatest interest, and they're the top 4 teams. I'll still touch on the other 2 series because there is relevance there, but I won't be spending as much time on those. First, I do want to talk about the general implications and how meaningful this weekend actually was. Because to me, the overarching storyline of the whole year has been which 3 North American teams are going to Worlds and who is going to be the odd man out. And that's specifically talking about the top 4 teams this weekend, which was C9, EG, TL, and 100. All these teams set very high expectations, made massive investments, and it is catastrophic to them to miss Worlds. And especially listening to other teams talk about the general strength of the teams behind the scenes, EG and TL sounded like the 2 strongest. 100 Thieves is explainable in the fact that they just kind of run it down in scrims, to put it lightly. They obviously still do decent in scrims, but compared to stage, they have the biggest difference. So most pro teams just didn't end up showing them respect. 100 Thieves use that as a certain level of motivation, and they consistently perform on stage. So they're in. That's the least surprising one at this point. The most surprising thing really is just the fact that EG and TL now, not only do they have to win another best of 5 against, in TL's case, CLG, and in EG's case, TSM, they would then have to face each other, and the loser would not go to the World Championship. It's just a massive amount of pressure for both of those teams, because I think, like, at least when TL lost to 100 Thieves, they were expecting that they'd have to beat C9, which, based on the way C9 had looked, is a less tall task than beating the 15-3 defending Spring Split champions to go to Worlds. So that's the stuff that is just the most compelling to me in terms of storylines that happened this weekend. And for C9 in particular, I really do have to credit their organization here, because, like, listen, after what they did in Spring Split, where they have the MVP in Summit, they have, going into the final week of the regular season, the best record, and then they kind of get figured out, so to speak, by 100 Thieves in the last week, and then really just crash completely out of playoffs. And that ended up crashing their entire roster. And I was so ready, if C9, say, loses this to EG and then loses to, say, TL or CLG later on and doesn't go to Worlds, like, it's very easy to be ready to criticize them for the moves they made, like trading away the league MVP in Summit and not finding ways to make it work. Like in Spring Split, I was making comparisons with the Summit Berserker as an import pair being almost as great as the Huni Reignover pair, if people remember from when they came over from Fnatic to Immortals. That's how dominant I felt like they were as imports in this league. And then C9 gets rid of one of them in Summit, moves Fudge back to top lane, who in lane is just a much less impressive player. Summit was solo winning them half of their games. He probably solo won them 8 games in the spring split. Fudge was okay, right? Jensen, on paper, is an upgrade to Fudge, and I think even in game was an upgrade to Fudge. So if like I was saying, like if C9 wanted to make a quick upgrade going into summer, you can just bring in Jensen. He has his green card. He doesn't count as an import, and you can still run back Summit. But they had a loyalty to Fudge. They move him back. And like honestly, just all of this working is so vindicating for Jack in this organization because it is such a big risk. And essentially the point I'm making, it would have been so easy to call them out for like easier, more straightforward decisions they could have made. But they took the big risk when other people wouldn't have been ready to, say, exile the league MVP after he wins it because he's lost a few playoff series. But honestly, it's paid off. It didn't look like it was going to throughout most of the summer split. And they really just played one hell of a series today against EG. They still have a chance of winning the split. Like, they could still be summer champions. But the most important thing at this moment is that they are going to the World Championship in North America, and they should be applauded for it. It's a great accomplishment with the Sven roll swap, with the Fudge re-roll swap, with Jensen coming back out of missing spring split entirely. So many things they had to adapt to in such a short amount of time, and they were able to do it against EG. Just awesome. Jensen also going to his 8th consecutive World Championship, which is, I think, a world record. It's definitely an NA record, but no one else has gone to 8 consecutive World Championships. To break down the series a little bit, one thing that I got to gloat about today was the big prediction graphic that they ran before the day, where there were 16 individual predictions from analysts, casters, some co-streamers, and some influencers. And I was the only one that had the Cloud9 prediction. And in honesty, I just thought the series was going to be very close. And I love being on the side of the prediction that people aren't willing to take. I thought C9 probably had like 45% chance of winning the series, but that's enough for me to be the standout person to predict them and have a clutch them out. And I also have noticed this trend over the years. This is why I predicted, this is also why I predicted EG to win spring finals in the moment against 100 Thieves. It's when you talk to a bunch of people about the series and everyone's like, you know, this could be really close. Actually, C9 could do better than people are expecting. Maybe this isn't as free for EG, but no one's like willing to just go over the line and say, oh yeah, but like, because like, how do you really justify a prediction against EG? They were 15-3. They're super clutch. They have like the best team fighting. They had one of the best MSI group stages of anyone in NA history, didn't follow an MSI slump, and the rookies just have more experience. Like, it's so hard to really truly justify a prediction against them. But C9, especially with the talent of Berserker and the fact that they have so many elements on their team that just hadn't came together to make strong team play, made me think the upset was possible. So happy that I took the plunge and predicted C9. But I want to get into the series itself. And I have some notes from what I remember from the game and some of the things that I noticed in draft. So for one, C9 permabanned Silas and Vi against EG, which obviously in retrospect is a very good call. I think Vi is something that allows Inspired to make some really powerful ganks. Inspired had an awful series by his standards. This was by far the worst, I think, this entire year. Part of that could have been because he was in Champ Select, and then also Silas is just such a playmaker and creative team fighter, which is what JoJo excels on, is his creativity in team fights. So I think those are two strong permabans, and they're not necessarily extremely strong picks in the meta, because C9 was willing to handshake a ton of stuff. And it definitely seemed like EG wasn't necessarily sure what their strongest stuff was, and that's shown by how rapidly they changed their first 3 bans throughout the series. So as an example of this, in game 2, in game 1, there's the handshake trade, I call it, when Sivir Zeri and then the 2 enchanters, Yumi Lulu, they're just traded back and forth. And then you build the rest of the team comp from there. I'd say that was like the most 50-50 draft of the series. Like, both teams actually had this overpowered bot laners, and then EG actually had the better front-to-back team fighting team comp because they had Ornn, but Fudge was able to execute the Camille, which few top laners are actually able to do against Ornn in NA, and he talked about it a little bit in the Pro to Pro with High afterwards. It requires good team coordination to be able to do that. You need to have very good tracking of the enemy jungler, because while Camille can beat Ornn 1v1, you're also taking Ignite in the matchup. So if you're not tracking the other jungler and you're pushed up trying to kill Ornn, if the other jungler is there, you just die. So it's very simplistic to punish by the opponent team if you're not able to track the jungler. But C9 they allowed Fudge to kind of take over that game on Camille, and then that gave them enough dive and team fights to make Danny's life on Sivir extremely difficult. But then, going into game 2, like, imagine this. EG has Danny. Like, probably the best team fighting AD carry in the league. The guy they give all of their resources to. They give him gold in the early game. They play a lot of the mid-game 4v5 so he can get solo turrets. They feed him as much as possible in late-game CS waves. And EG is banning away 3 AD carries in game. So they take the Sivir Zeri trade completely off the table, and they're also banning out Kalista. I actually like their draft in game 2. They ended up with Ezreal, Yumi. But just the fact that they banned those 3 ADs was a substantial pivot from the game. In game 2, there's one bit of draft inflexibility that punished EG. They ended up banning Ornn on the 4-5 rather than letting C9 have the opportunity to pick it, because Impact's not going to punish it with Camille. Quick tangent here, there was a post-game interview with Inspired where he's obviously emotional and just coming off a loss, but he revealed a lot of the things that he just, like, you could kind of tell it was what was coming directly into his head, almost blaming the reasons that they lost. One of them was, oh yeah, we don't play a lot of the meta champions, so it made some of our drafts bad. And when I heard that, I had that in mind as I was kind of going through the different picks. What was he referring to? Maybe he was referring to Danny not wanting to play Kalista. Maybe he was referring to Impact and Camille. Those were kind of the only 2 that I could come away with, but definitely those were things that were fairly important in the draft back and forth in this series. Inspired also, the criticism of him in this interview is he didn't take like enough accountability for his own actions, because he did have some smites specifically in the 4th game where he got the first Cloud Drake blind stolen by an axe, and then when Soul was being contested, he smote Scuttle Crab right in front of C9. C9 just bursted the Soul, because obviously they can, since Inspired's not going to be able to match it. But that's just like a side tangent. I want to get back to the series. And then, so in game 2, they ban out the 380 carries. And then in game 3, they banned the enchanters. They banned Yumi Lulu. It ended up working. Game 3 was their best draft because they picked Seraphine. They picked Seraphine Senna. They got that combination that 100 Thieves had picked the previous day and were able to run over late game team fights, especially because Cloud9 didn't have a team comp that could easily build healing reduction. I also think they gave over Zeri, but made sure Zeri couldn't have a good enchanter to make her less powerful. I think in game 3, for those of you who remember, Ben had Renata, and I think since no one else on the Cloud9 team could actually build healing reduction, if they could have made the call early on that Sven needed to delay his pick, just get the Putrefier item, I think that would have been a really good call. And then I also think Berserker Zeri, I was talking with the Blaze Olive about this on the desk, this would have been a game to at least go Runaan's, maybe Runaan's Titanic, because the Senna Seraphine builds really want to group up, and you really want to be able to punish that with as much AoE as possible on Zeri. And Berserker was doing completely single target damage, so it didn't really seem like he was. But that's the only game that EG won in the. When Game 4 rolled around, the Zeri, Renata, Zillion combination from C9 was just hilarious. It actually makes the Zillion ult so easy mode because you just have to bail out first. And then you can Zillion ult after as the person is ticking down from the reaction time. I mean, it puts more pressure on the support to get the bailout first, but it makes the Zillion ultimate so much more reliable. And it's another thing Inspired mentioned afterwards. I really did not see a way to win this game, especially once Zeri had a few kills. Like, what are you going to do against Renata Zillion? The one surprising thing in here was that the Sejuani Flex really did seem to play mind games on. It made them not want to target ban jungle or top in 4-5 because they just didn't know where Sejuani was going and didn't want bans. They still throw 2 bans at mid lane, LeBlanc and Azir, when Jojo had Ahri locked in, which is a little peculiar because I don't necessarily feel like when you have Ahri, you need to ban mid laners, but it's just because they didn't know what else to ban. They forgot about the Zillion. Jensen pops off on it, and, you know, that's history. 8 worlds in a row for Jensen, another worlds for Cloud9, and the looming matchup next week for each have to win 2 best of 5s to stay alive in the year. It could very well be their last weekend. So, really awesome series. I think in general, the thing that I said on the desk afterwards was that EG didn't really play like EG. They weren't setting Danny up for success the same way that they set Danny up for success in the regular season. They were doing things like moving him up for Rift Herald and then running him back, whereas previously they either just like bring him up for Rift Herald so he can get all the Rift Herald gold and then get the Rift Herald turret, or they just leave him bottom lane so he can farm. Like, so much of it has been about maximizing Danny's individual gold, and I just didn't see that play out of them today. Additionally, just in terms of enchanters and mid laners, like Jensen played an Orianna game, Jensen played a Zillion game. Both those can enable the AD carry much more than the things that JoJo was playing. And then the support picks weren't complementing Danny that much either. I mean, in Game 4, Vulcan was playing Alistar, which is a great champion for Vulcan, but it just doesn't help Danny succeed, whereas Berserker just had more tools to help him succeed. I'd say that was more true in Games 3 and 4 than 1 and 2, but as a general note, I think is still fairly accurate for the series. So that was one of the series that really got, I don't know, like the adrenaline going watching it because the stakes were so high. I'd say the same thing was true when I was casting the Team Liquid 100 Thieves game yesterday. And Closer was just so good, man. Like, I'll start with Game 5 of that series because that's the thing that people remember the most. Like, 100 Thieves had just dropped the 2 previous games. They were in the midst of getting reverse swept. Closer had just had an awful game on Vi. And they drop him to 4-5. More target bans get thrown at him. They have dropped him so they can get together their Deathball team composition that they'd pulled out earlier. That's the one that has Senna, Seraphine, Silas, Aatrox, like those 4 champions. They played twice in that series. The first time they had Wukong, this time it was obviously banned out. And he just pulls out Lee Sin. He said in an interview after the game that he hadn't played a game of Lee Sin in like 3 months. Like, so long. He's played thousands of games of Lee Sin in his life, but just obviously not recently. And he finds 3 angles in this game to just murder Han Sama's MS. Just ridiculous Lee Sin insects. And, like, the craziest thing about it is, like, one of them is actually that TL didn't stop him because the one in the bot side river that really turned the game, both teams are just staring at each other. It's what you call an eye contact fight, where there's just 5v5 in the river. You should never be able to get the misfortune in that context. At any point as he's flying in with the Lee Sin resonating strike, Leona can Q him, Renekton can W him, Azir can fire his wall. Han Sama could possibly flash back, although that's one of the harder things. But, like, TL was just dumbfounded that it was happening, and he pulls it off. And he does that 3 times. It completely sends the series. I mean, that's the breaking point of what sent Team Liquid down into losers bracket, was how insane those Lee Sin plays were. And they're actually some of the most exciting plays I've seen in the LCS. Going back through the series a bit more, though, I do feel like TL is definitely going to be kicking themselves, because, like, in the first game, every time you go into a series, you're trying to figure out, like, what are the critical bans that are going to weaken this team. 100 Thieves, like, perma-ban Trundle Azir. Trundle is an amazing ban against them, but I think because Santorin is just so damn good at Trundle, and he has a noticeably different impact in the game when he's on a different champion. But TL goes in, and they ban Aphelios Lucian in the first 2 games. First off, like, no one has really been playing Aphelios this playoffs, unless a bunch of other ADs are banned. So it's way down the priority list. And then Lucian, they eventually did let through later in the series and were able to beat it. So definitely, I think some missed opportunities with, if those game 1 bans could have been different, maybe stopping them from having Callista in game 1, where FBI was able to run over them and TL lost that game 1 handily. Or in game 2, throwing a ban at Senna or Seraphine. Seraphine ended up being a massive pick in both of the biggest series this weekend. If they weren't using those bans on Aphelios and Lucian, maybe this is a completely different conversation. But those are the things that you never can know for sure. It's just something I noticed as I was going through this, that a lot of their bans in the start of the series, after seeing what played out later in the series, were probably wasted bans. They just wouldn't have known it at the time. I think it was also an extremely exciting series. Bjergsen being able to pull out Zillion in game 3 and just, I think, stunning 100 Thieves. Abba walked on multiple double bombs. It is definitely one of those picks you don't play against often, so you forget a lot of the cues and ways you need to play against it. Totally crushes them. Whippo pulls out Set in game 4, goes like 11-0. Game 5 was honestly also the tightest game. It was so close through the whole thing until closer started catching Hansama with those kicks. So overall, the great series, and congratulations to 100 Thieves as well. Sticking with the exact same roster once again. So many teams feel this necessary upheaval if things don't quite go well, but continuity has its strengths as well. They had this roster when they went to World last year. They didn't make it out of group stage. Some organizations would decide that it's time that they need to make a big change because they want to make a big push. That's a lot of the history of what North American teams have done. But almost never, when a team has a good run at Worlds and then tries to blow things up, do they actually look better the next year. They usually take a step backwards. 100 Thieves is able to stick with the exact same roster for 3 splits in a row. I think the continuity and the trust built between them is what edged them over Team Liquid. Team Liquid fell apart in game 5. And they have a hell of a run back up. Still absolutely crazy that Team Liquid and EG, one of them will not be going to work. Quickly talk about the other series this week. TSM FlyQuest, I'd say, was probably like the most disappointing series, I think, from a FlyQuest standpoint, because if I just go back to a point in the summer split when they were 7-4, I had such high hopes for them. For them to finish outside of the top 6 is a really poor finish from where they were. It is interesting how it happened, though, because digging through the stats last week, I realized they were the closest to the EG Danny playstyle. They were replicating that with Johnson. And I think it would have worked if TSM had played their starting roster the whole series. But subbing Tactical in ended up being a good call. I think he did put significantly more pressure on Johnson in laning phase, made it really hard for him to get resources, which threw off the way that FlyQuest wanted to play. And then game 5, Tactical just had one of his great games. Like, Tactical is a very inconsistent player, but when he is on, he is so good. And after what's happened with him this year, getting dropped to Academy, not having good Academy games, I was very surprised to see him here. But he really showed up in game 5, so I'm super happy for him. 11 kills on Xayah, just awesome. Still, reading some comments, there's still a ton of people that just hate the guy, which I hate to see. So he got subbed in, right, in game 3. Plays Draven Pike. Really tries to smash lane. In this game, Spica goes 0-10 on Vi. It's like an unwinnable AD carry game. And I'm reading the post-game Reddit thread, and I see a ton of people saying, like, whose idea was it to put in tactical? Like, he could have done anything in that game. There's definitely a little bit of I think, over-the-top hate for tactical. I was really happy to see him win this series. He does have to play against EG next week. So that will be a very tall task for TSM. Definitely get to play once again. So the TSM EG game and the Team Liquid CLG game, those will be Thursday, Friday. Then the winner's bracket final will be Saturday. And then the winner of both those losers bracket games that happen on Thursday, Friday will be the Sunday match for the finals world spot. Very, very quickly on the CLG Golden Guardian series. Could have been so much more disappointing. The Yone ban that Golden Guardians had, Yone ban Golden Guardians had, very good ban. I think Team Liquid would be very wise to keep ban against them. I thought it was very effective to flex that they with. I think CLG approached that series probably too conservatively, thinking that they could just beat Golden Guardians easily. Golden Guardians improved a lot in the 2 weeks from the end of the regular season. I got to talk to Olive about it on the desk today in between segments. He was definitely having a lot of hopium going into playoffs, which is like really good if any team can reach this mode, especially after having such bad regular. I think, like all of these teams are beatable. He said all of these teams are beatable except for TL and EG. So, just beat CLG, then maybe we can pull an upset on like a C9 or 100 Thieves because, a lot of people do beat 100 Thieves in scrims, so you can find that internal confidence in them. Was not to be for Golden Guardians, but they had a lot of confidence going into that. I think one of the critical things for CLG going into the TL series, if they want to have a chance, that they're able to find unique team. They try to play Team Liquid in standard games with control mages mid, or if they're trying to play like Ornn versus Sejuani top lane, I do not think they have a chance that way. I need to see Dokla on split pushing bruiser champions or carry champions. I want to see more Palathox Akali. They're so creative at finding first blood in the early game with contracts and getting early lead. They just need dynamic team comps in the league. Because I think playing a standard game, other teams definitely will. But I think that's going to do it for this week of playoffs. It was, I would say, I'm obviously still in the moment. I might have enjoyed this more than finals weekend in spring because the stakes were so high. I probably rank it number 2. I'd put the finals weekend as the best weekend of NA so far this year. This is definitely number 2 for that, just because it's nearly the end chapter for these teams. I think it's a successful year now for both 100 Thieves and Cloud9, whether or not they win the summer split, because they're able to attend Worlds that is in North America, and there's so much competition for that spot. Next week, we're going to see the final team to make it. We're going to have a little bit more clarity on who's going to be favorites going into finals weekend. And, I hope to see you there. Really quick, Emily was supposed to join me on this episode. Based on her schedule, she had a conflict, so she will be joining me in the midweek episode, which will likely drop early Thursday morning before that first game. So hope to see everybody there as well. Thanks for watching once again.